Well, here's a little rundown on some of our national and international headlines for this Wednesday morning. And as always, there's more news out there than we can possibly deliver to you in 3 to 5 minutes. So if you're interested in getting more, I've actually got a whole bunch of links posted here at my website, radiofreespeech.com. And for subscribers, you get an audio version detailing all of those stories, 30 minutes of both national and Alaskan news delivered right to your inbox at 5 a.m. every morning. Once again, that's radiofreespeech.com. So there's been a gas attack, another chemical attack in Syria, killed at least 58 people, and apparently nobody knows who did it, although the United Nations and several other human rights observers have said in the past that it has been the Syrian government who has been carrying out the gas attacks that have happened, although the Syrian government blames the rebels. In this particular case, nobody's claimed responsibility. Most of the dead are children, and the very graphic symptoms that they describe are definitely symptomatic of some kind of a chemical attack. So we're talking about a prohibited weapon of mass destruction being used once again in the Syrian conflict. More on the St. Petersburg metro bombing. Suspect, apparently he's a 22-year-old from Kyrgyzstan. Conflicting reports as to whether he was a suicide bomber or whether he planted the bombs that went off. However, there were 3 different bombs, one that went off on a train itself, another one that went off in a station, and a third that was planted at a different station that was found in time. Now, at this point, not sure exactly who he was in terms of the background, except that he was from Kyrgyzstan, the same place, by the way, that the Boston Marathon suspects were from. Theresa May, visiting Saudi Arabia, has taken a stand against the Saudi regime by not wearing a headscarf and ignoring the Foreign Office advice. If you recall, back in 1985, when Margaret Thatcher, the last woman prime minister, visited Saudi Arabia, she wore a long dress that covered herself, and she wore a hat that covered almost all of her hair. So this is a distinct break, not only from the advice, but also from tradition, and it's receiving almost universal aplomb and accolades on Twitter and other social media. And people are so proud of you. So whether or not she's going to be able to secure Saudi Arabia partnership in terms of investment in the future, that remains to be seen. There's a report in Al Jazeera on the sugarcane farmers in India and how there's this continuous cycle of debt and suicide. Literally hundreds of thousands of farmers in India have killed themselves over the last couple of decades. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they just keep getting further and further in debt, trying, of course, to get money to raise, to feed their families, and instead sinking deeper down, it's actually an escape not just for them, but for their families, for them to kill themselves. The NCAA has ended the North Carolina boycott after the rollback of the so-called bathroom bill. However, that legislation that the state of North Carolina has now enacted is still being criticized by members of the LGBTQ, I'm not sure exactly how many letters go with that, the groups. They're saying that because it prohibits localities from passing specific anti-discrimination, rules, they're saying, well, it doesn't go far enough. Also, a massive dead humpback whale has washed ashore in New York City, right there in Queens. I don't know if you heard about the massive surveillance that NYPD undertook against Black Lives Matter back in 2014, 2015. A new report just came out that was picked up by The Guardian, actually in response to a lawsuit filed by a New York law firm about the issue, Freedom of Information Act, and they found out in terms of the massive scope that they had undercover cops in so many of the small groups that they were able to track the movements of groups as small as 5 to 7 people. They had access to their text messages, they had access to their emails, and they were sharing all of it with the police authorities. Raises some big questions, and in fact the lawsuit itself and some of the lawyers saying, this raises questions about whether or not the police actually followed the city's own rules. That'll be the subject of my commentary today. Also, more on the extreme vetting. We talked about this, I believe, last week. It's now been expanded. We're talking about 38 different countries, including England and France, where people visiting the United States would have to prove their good intentions by giving over their phones and their passwords, not just to the phone, but also to their social network accounts. Lastly, something to think about is that Trump's authoritarian instincts, might you call them, right now it's ruining U.S. credibility on human rights, according to activists. Now, this week alone, I remember earlier in the week he met with the president of Egypt. The groups are like, hey, make sure you mention the prisoners being held. Well, now he's meeting tomorrow with the president of China. And when you've got somebody who's showing a friendliness to authoritarian regimes, it kind of removes the platform to be able to lecture these people about human rights in general. That's the point that the activists are making, and I think it's worth discussion. Maybe at some other time. Check out what I'm doing at radiofreespeech.com and tell all your friends. Thanks.